Great. Well, welcome everyone, and thank you for attending Elected Officials to Protect America's press conference on the Build Back Better program and the importance of the climate legislation and policies that are within it. We're very lucky to have a number of distinguished elected officials from across the United States and a member of the Sustainable Business Council here today to join us to talk about why it's so vitally important that we act on this legislation in a timely manner to protect our communities and our nation and ensure the economic prosperity for everyone. Today we have State Senator Natalie Murdock, and she's going to lead us off and tell us a little bit about her state and some of the policies that are happening there that are leading the nation too.
All right, good morning. Thank you so much, and so happy to be here with all of you. We'll talk a little bit more specifically of the challenges we are facing in North Carolina, as well as providing some policy solutions. In North Carolina, the 2020 Climate Change Science Report found that 2018 was North Carolina's wettest year on record in 125 years of record keeping. This was in part due to Hurricane Florence, which produced the heaviest rainfall in all of North Carolina's history. Extreme rainfall and severe thunderstorms are likely to increase as our climate warms and cause flash flooding, especially in our urban areas. These increasingly frequent floods pose a threat to all North Carolinians, but especially marginalized communities living in low-lying areas that are prone to flooding. It's expected that by the end of the century, all of North Carolina's coast will experience disruptive coastal flooding. And our low-income residents cannot afford to keep relocating, and they can't afford to pay for hotel rooms while they wait for FEMA to intervene and provide them with assistance. Between 2015 and 2019, North Carolina had its warmest overnight. These warm nights health with urbanization, the days and nights expected to, and this combined with those in urban areas being at especially high risk. Communities already hit hardest by systemic racism and environmental injustice tend to be located in areas most susceptible to deadly heat waves and other extreme weather events. These communities also face increased health burden for all population. Vulnerable communities to recover take months, even years for communities to recover. Unfortunately, it is all too common. Some never do. They are never able to bounce back, reduce our carbon footprint, and stop relying on fossil fuels. We need to develop our communities and make them more resilient to storms and floods by expanding access to renewable energy and weatherizing buildings. That's why here in North Carolina, we are thrilled to currently be working on an energy bill that will reduce our overall carbon footprint. We do have a ways to go and a lot of work that we need to engage in truly building resilient communities on the coast, as well as all low-lying areas. But we are grateful that the Build Back Better plan is a step in the right direction. And we encourage President Biden to declare a climate change emergency and look forward to working with leaders in the administration, as well as the EPA, on how we can move forward at the state level, as well as the national level, to truly address climate change. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Senator. Next, we're gonna hear from Representative Stephanie Kifowit. She's in Illinois and also a fellow Marine Corps veteran.
Thank you, Alex. And following the good senator from North Carolina is an honor and a privilege. In Illinois, we embrace the Biden's Build Back Better agenda, and we did pass a comprehensive, really first in the nation climate change package that follows the Biden's Build Back Better agenda in reaching the state's goals, and it mirrors the nation's goals that they are trying to establish today. We preserved our existing fleet of nuclear reactors. We adopted more clean and renewable energy. We incentivized sales of electric vehicles and all key components that mirror President Biden's Build Back Better agenda. Therefore, we have shown in Illinois that this agenda is not out of reach, and it is very possible to do. Part of what we did in Illinois is we are looking at our new renewable portfolio standard, which we would raise our renewable share to 40% by 2030. Right now, we are at 10% renewable, 40% from nuclear. We are going to raise that by 2030. We have a goal of 50% by 2040 and a goal of zero carbon electricity sector by 2045. And beyond that, a net zero carbon state economy by 2050. This is an extremely ambitious, and it is a new benchmark for the Midwest and a model that other states can follow. We also have Illinois Solar for All, which helps get rooftop solar power into low-income renters and homeowners to help them with electricity costs. And we increased that funding from $10 million to $50 million a year. We also provided assistance, as we said, stabilize our nuclear power plants. So we provide assistance to our Byron, Dresden, and Braidwood plants with about $700 million in subsidies. And this is important, Alex. We had an independent analysis come up with this number. It is not the ComEd number that they wanted $5 billion for, but we were able to pass this fiscally responsibly and saves our nuclear power plants and do the right thing for not only taxpayers, but also for our environment. So it can be done. We can be fiscally responsible, and we can be addressing the climate change issue that is facing us today. Our private coal and oil fired power plants must get to zero emissions by 2030. Municipality-owned coal plants, the Prairie State and Adalman Station, must reduce emissions 45% by 2035. Which could mean shutting down one or two of their boilers, and 100% by 2045. So we in Illinois strive to be the leaders in addressing climate change because we acknowledge that climate change affects all other states. But we also have equity standards, and we also are looking at providing labor, project labor agreements for all our projects, and looking at individuals that have hit hardest that need workforce development and transition assistance as well. It's included in our breaking nationwide model for clean energy. We have an energy transition workforce commission to report on the workforce needs, and our Department of Commerce and Economic Opportunity will create a program to reduce energy transition barriers, a grant program to promote economic development in transitioning communities, and a scholarship fund for children and families of laid off workers. We have protections for consumers in our bill, and we have utility ethics and rate reforms. As you might know, Alex, Illinois has been in the news a little bit, and we are taking our ethical standards quite seriously in wake of some investigations that have hit our state very hard. And we have put in ethical standards and rate reforms in our bill. And so with that, Alex, I'm just proud to be here to represent Illinois and this amazing climate change bill that we passed. It was not easy. It was 2.5 years in the works, but we can get it done. And it was bipartisan, Alex. We had bipartisan support in the House and in the Senate. So it's not a Democrat only bill, and that is supporting the key components of the Biden's Build Back Better agenda. It can be done, and Illinois proved that we can get it done. So thank you, Alex, so much.
Thank you. That's inspiring to see how you got the legislation through in a bipartisan manner. It shows at the state level still there is work that can be done together. Great. I'd love to introduce Paul Evans. He's a representative from Oregon, and he's also the co-chair of the EOPA Leadership Council and an Air Force veteran.
Hello there. First of all, I haven't been on a platform with so many Marines at one time, so Semper Fi there. As an Air Force guy, I try to look at things at the 30,000 foot level. And Oregon is, I think, making real progress despite some of the challenges we face. Over the past 7 years, we have refined our low carbon fuel standard. We have moved, set a date by 2035, hopefully a little earlier than that, but by 2035, we'll be off of coal completely. We have pushed for a carbon tax that did not pass, but we have a governor who, through executive order, put a number of pieces of that puzzle into place. And providing that our Republican partners stay in the legislature to do our business. You might have heard in the news that they sometimes leave the Capitol, and that makes business a little bit more difficult. But providing that they stay in this next session, I actually think we're going to make real progress on renewable diesel and a number of other bridge efforts to try to get into a more sustainable future. When it comes to what President Biden is putting together and what Oregon hopes to be able to support as a part of that, we're excited, quite frankly, about a lot of the things that he wants to do. The Conservation Corps, the Climate Corps, is one of the things that we're hoping for. As you might know, that Oregon is really, with our forests and our vast federal lands, in many ways, we're not really one of the largest emitter states. We're hoping to actually make sure that we are able, in a position to take advantage of the sequestration side of the equation as we move into the future. So we're very excited about that. We're moving toward an electrification of all of the major transportation efforts in terms of buses and some of the passenger trains, light rail. We're excited about where this package is right now, but we, quite frankly, are asking all of our congressional delegation, people across the country, to continue to move the ball forward, pass the bill, so we can actually start realizing the future that we know is possible. We are on the West Coast. One of the things about living on the West Coast, we can't see China from Oregon, but we certainly understand China's economy. And we recognize that if we're going to be able to compete in the 21st century, we have to get smarter and we have to get more sustainable. And we have to be focused on how we as stewards of a planet can continue to build an economy. So we're excited about the plan. We're hoping that the Congress will move sooner than later. We're trying to do our part, and just excited about what we might be able to get done in the next couple of years.
I'm excited for you guys too, because there's an amount of amazing and really wonderful opportunities here for everyone. And some of those opportunities are also in Arizona. So I'd like to introduce Senator Peshlakai from Arizona.
Yate, everybody. I am Senator Jamescita Peshlakai. I am Navajo of the Tango People clans born for the Red House clan, and I represent Legislative District number 7 in Arizona. Arizona has 23 tribes, and 8 of those are in my district. I have the largest legislative district in the country, and there are over 500 tribes in the United States. This Build Back Better plan is critical for Native Americans in the United States, because we haven't had the opportunity and the chance to build up in the first place. Federal policies and state policies have always put Native American communities on the back burner. And so the Build Back Better plan has infrastructure dollars in there that would create, for the very first time, infrastructure to communities and populations that have never had running water or electricity. We are living in third world conditions within the midst of the United States, the most developed and powerful country in the world in 2021. We also have the most prominent number, the highest rate of service among our Native American populations that joined the military. And quite frankly, we joined the military because of poverty. We have the highest unemployment rates in the country, and living in conditions that have no infrastructure and no hopes for employment. This is the reason why we are drafted out of poverty, is what we often say. So we are desperately awaiting a a ray of hope from Congress. And this would be the very first time for many of these communities. And we are directly impacted by climate change each and every day, very directly. If you don't have AC and the temperatures keep rising higher and higher every year, you are in harm's way. And so this Build Back Better Act is critical for us, for not only our elders and our children and the future, that will create a foundation for all future generations to move forward. And this is really we're asking for the very basic that every other American takes for granted. And, we would have energy in some places for the first time. Arizona should be the solar energy capital of the world, of the nation. And we need broadband in rural areas. There are some areas that are simply, you cannot communicate with them unless you have a satellite phone. And these are, I have communities down at the bottom of the Grand Canyon, the Havasupai tribe. So the Build Back Better plan is a first step for us because we haven't had that opportunity before. And so it addresses so many very fundamental, basic things that every other American takes for granted. And so we must have this for our veterans and moving forward to join the rest of the world in what can only be a brighter future from this point forward. Thank you.
Cool. No, thank you. And it's thanks to everyone's efforts here that we can create that brighter future. And moving on to Utah, Chairman Glenn Wright, he's also, Paul, I think you're at 50-50 with the Marines here because he's Air Force as well. And we can still compete pretty well, I'd say, but good to see good representation. And he's done a number of great policy and work in Utah, particularly on the environment, and would love to hear from you.
Good morning from Utah. Summit County is just to the east of Salt Lake City, and we're probably most well known for our ski resorts, Park City and Deer Valley. But the rest of our county is also cattle ranching, and about 40% of it is national forest. I was elected in 2016 to my position on the county council at the time of a rather unfortunate national election, and I figured that I was going to have to do as much as I could locally to protect the environment. The fire season here has dramatically affected our existence in Summit County. It's decreased our snowpack in the winter as a resource for our ski resorts, and it's lengthened the fire season here by 4 to 6 weeks in both the beginning and the end of the fire season. In comparison to the senator from North Carolina, Utah just had the hottest and driest weather in recorded history. And we had a very serious fire that's threatened Summit County. We had to evacuate 1,000 residents about 6 weeks ago, and we really dodged a bullet there in it not getting into our county and devastating one of our neighborhoods. To fight some of these issues, we're working with the National Forest, State Forestry, and state lands with a shared stewardship program that will do some fuel removal and watershed protection in the Weber Basin in Summit County that supplies water to about 700,000 people in Utah. We're also starting a resilience fund in Summit County that will help to fund some of those forest health activities and watershed protection activities. And we have on our ballot next month a general obligation bond for $50 million to try to, which will be used to preserve sensitive lands and do forest protection work. At the same time, about 4 or 5 years ago, I got involved with lobbying the state legislature to improve our renewable energy prospects. And we were able to get a bill through the state Republican-controlled state legislature that will allow communities to choose to bring in 100% renewable electrical energy. I'm on the board that's doing the program design and negotiating with Rocky Mountain Power on that. And we should have a design for that program within the next 4 to 6 weeks. And I believe that our goal is to bring 100% renewable electrical energy into our county for all users by 2030. And I think we'll beat that goal. There are another 22 communities in Utah that have 25% of the electrical demand in the state that have also signed on to that project. So those are some of the things that we've been working on in Summit County and working with nearby communities. The President's Build Back Better plan is really vital to helping us continue in our work in this area.
Great. So next, we're going to talk about some solutions, particularly from the business side, because this is a joint effort. It can't just be policy. The private sector needs to be involved. And Richard Lawton from the Sustainable Business Council has been engaging in that and talking with many businesses who are dedicated to solving the climate crisis.
Great, thank you. Well, I'm the son of a former Marine. My dad was a Marine from 1940 to 1966, fought in the Pacific and was wounded on the Battle of Okinawa. So that's a Marine Corps theme. My name is Richard Lawton. I'm executive director of the New Jersey Sustainable Business Council, and we're a state affiliate of the American Sustainable Business Council, which is a growing network of companies that are redefining business success within what's called a triple bottom line framework of people, planet, and profit. And our members represent a wide range of industries, but what they have in common is a commitment to not only implementing environmentally sustainable and socially responsible business practices within their own companies and supply chains. They also work together through ASBC and NJSBC to advance policy change aimed at creating a more vibrant, just, and sustainable economy overall. So these companies, as well as those represented by other business organizations like Ceres, Social Venture Circle, American Independent Business Alliance, and Main Street Alliance, all recognize the harsh reality that climate risk also represents an escalating business risk. New Jersey, our state, epitomizes the increasingly high stakes involved in the direction of our political economy and the stark choice that we face. While our state has become a leader in advancing policies and market innovation aimed at achieving 100% clean energy by 2050, while creating a more equitable clean energy economy over the long term, our communities and businesses remain among the most vulnerable to climate impacts in the near term. So in the race between reaching clean energy or climate tipping points, we're way behind. So whether it's from flooding in New Jersey or New Orleans, fires in the West, or weather disasters destroying Midwest and Southern farms, American businesses, local economies, and especially environmental justice communities are increasingly facing an existential threat across the entire country. During the year 2020 alone, the United States experienced 22 climate-caused disasters that exceeded a record $1 billion each in damages. As we're now seeing and experiencing, when supply chains that have been designed and optimized for efficiency at the expense of resiliency are disrupted, costs increase and consumers and businesses suffer. And so since this kind of a more stable operating environment that this infrastructure was designed for will become increasingly unstable over the coming decades, we're now facing an urgent imperative and an opportunity to increase our adaptive capacity by modernizing our infrastructure for greater resiliency. So investing in offshore wind, solar, energy efficiency, battery storage innovation, electrifying our transportation system and buildings, investing in green infrastructure, all of these will combine to lower carbon emissions while also creating new industries, companies, and family supporting jobs. So that's why more than 400 American business leaders recently signed a letter calling on Congress to immediately address the climate crisis by passing President Biden's Build Back Better agenda. These companies know that America needs bold, big investments to ensure that we become leaders in the clean energy economy, in which we're already lagging behind. President Biden's Build Back Better plan combines concrete actions to mitigate against climate change and to rebuild our economy with the means to pay for those actions. And what this is showing is business support for or opposition to this act or this agenda serves as kind of a litmus test that helps draw a clear line between those companies that are truly committed to real action and those who only pretend, but selfishly act to block necessary steps to meet this existential challenge that will impact all of us, including the business community. So many of those who helped create this climate crisis, like the fossil fuel industry, and even some companies who claim to be concerned about climate change and espouse corporate social responsibility values and serving stakeholder interests, these same companies are spending millions of dollars lobbying to block this plan. So as responsible businesses, we're standing up and speaking out to endorse both the investments against climate change and for rebuilding our economy, along with the revenue measures needed to pay for these investments. This may be our last moment to reverse the worst consequences of climate change, and we can't afford to wait any longer. We can't afford half measures. So businesses who demonstrate a real commitment to creating long-term value for all stakeholders agree. This infrastructure agenda must be passed and implemented without delay.
Great. Thank you. It's the understatement of the press conference, right? As the 400 members who signed that letter, and over 300 lawmakers have signed a similar letter on EOPA side, that we all know the urgency of this and why we can't wait, because these disasters are just increasingly, as you said, $1 billion for 22 storms, which is unbelievably economically disastrous. However, we have some amazing opportunities on the flip side here. So one of the questions asked, this is kind of really in the theme of the press conference here, is what benefits, opportunities would the Build Back Better plan, particularly the climate focused opportunities in it, help in your districts and your states and communities? So anyone can jump in, or we can go in the order what you spoke.
I'll be happy to jump in. The project I'm working on to bring 100% renewable energy into Summit County really is reliant on, once we set a rate structure, building large amounts of solar and wind power, and bringing that in at the lowest possible rate is what's most important to our community and the economy of our community.
I would say the same for North Carolina, just having a federal partner to focus on renewables. There is some support for solar in the legislation that just made it out of the Senate, the state Senate yesterday. And I think just in general, just having a federal partner again, I mean, I'm just thrilled that, we just have federal leadership at the EPA. North Carolina is proud to remind folks that Secretary Regan was first in North Carolina before becoming EPA administrator. And so just having the ability to truly have a federal partner to assist us in our state work, as well as guidance and learning more best practices, has really been invaluable already.
Great.
I would just echo the good senator from North Carolina, and just mention that Illinois passed our legislation, and having the federal government in conjunction with that legislation will just do so much more. We have a goal of putting 1 million electric vehicles in Illinois on the road. And if we can quadruple that through the help of the federal government, that can make an enormous impact. We're also, with the federal government partnering right now, our director of the Illinois Power Agency estimated that getting to 40% renewable energy by 2030 would deliver over 1.2 billion in lower total energy costs for Illinoisans. And if the federal government and we pass Biden's Build Back Better, we can just extrapolate that to so much more power. So pairing the Illinois legislation with the federal legislation really would make such an impact of astronomical. It would just be momentous, and it would really make so much of a difference. It just needs to be done.
I would agree. From Oregon's perspective, I think that there are three reasons that we need the president's plan to pass. The first is to accelerate our broadband efforts. Broadband may not at first glance seem like important to the climate, but the more that we can actually have the economy working on the internet instead of people moving and having to drive and transportation, et cetera, there's a win there. The second is the money for a comprehensive national plan toward electrification and other types of efforts. Oregon and California and Washington and other individual states, including Illinois and North Carolina, have been trying to find our own way, but having a national standard and a national leader will really simplify the process. And the third thing is that when it comes to really getting into the weeds of the problem, there are a lot of different types of activities that Oregon cannot afford by itself to do that this comprehensive plan actually will help with. The Climate Conservation Corps idea of trying to make the environment much more healthy, robust, and able to sequester carbon. Also in Oregon, because of our wildfires, helping us recover from that. And also the elements of the bill that have to do with diversifying a workforce and looking at green economy jobs. Oregon can't do on its own. But with this Build Back Better agenda, the money and the support from the national government will be transformational. So we cannot understate how important it is that we get this passed sooner than later so we can get about the work of getting ready for the 21st century.
Richard, yeah.
Yeah, just a couple of points from New Jersey. You know, like any state, New Jersey, we've made a lot of progress so far, and we have very ambitious goals. We're in the middle of developing 7,500 megawatts of offshore wind power. We just passed in 2020 an EV law that's helping to expand the electrification of the transportation system. But you know, no state is an island, and our progress to some degree is contingent, since we're interconnected with other regions and states, is contingent on the federal government and federal policies and support. So for instance, even though we're expanding solar and expanding offshore wind, we're not a closed system when it comes to our energy system. We're connected to PJM, which is a regional transmission operator. So it's important that, you know, in terms of optimizing their mix of energy sources in that grid, they don't put cleaner renewable energy sources at a disadvantage as compared to you know, coal plants and you know, fossil fuel burning plants. So that's an important, because it's all interrelated. And then also just the electrification. There's one of the barriers is range anxiety. So investing in infrastructure for EV charging stations to create a national grid will lower one of the barriers that consumers have from switching from ICE or internal combustion engines to EVs. So those are a couple of things. You know, even though we're making good progress in New Jersey, if we can make much quicker progress if we had aligned and supportive federal policy as well and investments.
Yeah, absolutely. The impact of the federal government has the states and the resources it comes to bear can multiply the amazing work you guys are doing at the local and state level. So we have a question, particularly for the veteran lawmakers. What elements of the Build Back Better agenda are important to national security?
Be happy to jump in on that. Renewable energy that we develop locally or regionally around the U.S. combined with electrifying our transportation fleet will make us no longer reliant on foreign sources of fuel. I became a political activist myself when the Iraq War started, and this is the path of never having another oil-generated war that we send our troops to. This is national security at its finest.
No, I have to agree with the good councilman. We need to be independent in our energy forces, because having that dependency and not shoring up our electrical grid to make sure that we are sustainable is a national security crisis in and of itself. And shoring up our nuclear fleet and adopting more clean and renewable energy is exactly how we can ensure America's independence to make sure. And then putting more electrical vehicles on the road helps with commerce to make sure that we're not dependent on oil prices for commerce, and we're not depending on those other entities that are in control of the energy supply right now. We need to be independent, and this is our way to be independent.
I agree with both of the folks that just talked. I also have a frustration, if you will, with the current invisible subsidies that continue our habit of using bad for the planet fueling. We don't often think about how much we spend to have a military force deployed to protect our natural resources that we need. And we don't often think about the trillions of dollars over the last 50 plus years that we've invested to ensure that there's a carrier group ready to defend the oil supply, et cetera. The thing I like about this plan is it actually, if it's implemented correctly, will in many ways bring fairness and transparency to the kinds of energy that we want to use as a country, and actually subsidize the things that we can look ourselves in the mirror and be proud about, instead of continuing to subsidize things that really, as Councilman Wright said, makes us send soldiers into combat zones because our country's national security is dependent. I also believe that the Build Back Better program will, in addition to help us be energy secure, will help us combat a lot of the global climate change that we are starting to recognize. It has a concrete plan of trying to at least answer the carbon issue, and no other plan out there, Republican or Democrat, really has addressed it in such a comprehensive manner. So that's one of the reasons I'm excited about this plan. It is putting really a light on where we should be investing our time and energy, and it's putting a light on the kinds of things we should be investing in.
Absolutely. Oddly enough, those subsidies are focusing on the going backwards rather than forwards. Another question we have is, with the transition to clean renewable energy infrastructure being a key component of revising climate change, what actions are you taking to prepare the oil and gas industry workforce for the transition to clean energy?
Well,
I'll jump in briefly. Yeah, go for it, Glenn.
Senator?
Oh, yeah, I was going to be brief and honestly highlight that it's something we need help with. We have a lot of ideas, but as a General Assembly, we have a lot of work to do. I believe just transition is the phrase that folks use to talk about that, and we need to do a better job of that. When we closed a coal plant, before I was in the state Senate, but spent 5 years in the western part of the state in Asheville, when we closed that coal plant down, all 100 some odd of those employees were able to be, reallocated and move somewhere else in other divisions, and they all kept their jobs. As we look to continue to close more coal plants, since we do have a history of issues with coal ash and other environmental concerns, that is something that we need to get serious about. I support, as well as my colleagues in my caucus, we have a phenomenal community college system. We really want to work to get folks trained for other industries. And I think we also do need to be honest, there will be a gap. The green economy and the clean economy still isn't quite there with those numbers. So I think it will be a mix of other trades in addition to the clean and green jobs that we do know that are coming, but it will take a little bit more time for us here in North Carolina to get those online. Also weatherizing homes and a lot of things we can do to retrofit current building structures also provides a lot of economic opportunity, but we will need funding to support those measures.
I'll just talk about what Illinois put in our bill, and we did fund this through a slight rate increase on our consumers' bills. It was less than it was around $3, I believe, a month. So we were able to fund this, but on our workforce and development in our bill, The bill creates an $80 million a year Clean Jobs Workforce Network Hub program. It creates 13 hubs around the state to deliver workforce development programs to low income and underserved populations, and also those that might be displaced, as the good senator said, with regards to coal plants closing. Our Department of Commerce and Economic Opportunity and the Illinois Department of Employment Security will work to develop a displaced worker bill of rights. And a $40 million a year will go towards transition assistance for areas dependent on fossil fuel production and generation. And one of the things that we've created is 2 what we call green bank style programs. So the Clean Energy Jobs and Justice Fund will provide financing and low interest lending to clean energy projects in low income and marginalized communities. And the Illinois Finance Authority Climate Bank, more like a conventional green bank, will provide seed funding and develop public-private partnerships to draw more private capital into clean energy programs. We also created a clean energy incubator program that will offer support and low interest capital to small energy businesses and contractors to about 35 million a year. And this will be a program to train and place soon to be released incarcerated people in clean energy fields. And then there will be programs meant to encourage the development of solar and storage on site of closed fossil fuel plants to help employ, again, laid off workers. We created the Energy Transition Workforce Commission that will report on the success of the workforce needs in the decarbonization economy and recommend further changes. And then our Department of Commerce and Economic Opportunity will create a program to reduce energy transition barriers. So a grant program that promote economic development in transition communities and a scholarship fund for children of families of laid off workers. So we took this subject very seriously, and we provided those workforce components in the legislation that we passed.
In Utah, we have several counties in central Utah that are going to be hubs of renewable energy, already are hubs of renewable energy. Emory County has 2 of the largest coal-fired electrical generating plants in the state. And in those, they know they're going to be transitioning out of coal over the next 15 years. And they're starting to bring in and build solar farms in those areas to plug into the grid where right next to where those coal-fired plants are. And they're gradually replacing coal usage in those coal generating plants. In Millard County, there's the IPP plant that supplies a massive amount of electricity to California. And that plant is transitioning from coal to a combination of natural gas and green hydrogen, which will be 100% green hydrogen by, I believe they said 2045, or perhaps earlier than that. And next county south of there, Millard County, has enormous resources in both wind, solar, and they're developing geothermal resources. There's a DOE project called the Forge there that is doing research on how to split the rocks in the geothermal formations there to provide geothermal energy. So those are some of the renewable energy sources that we're developing here in Utah.
Can I highlight one from New Jersey?
Please.
Yeah, so I mentioned that New Jersey's goal is to, and they're starting to develop what will be 7,500 megawatts of offshore wind. And since, that'll be the largest, I think, in the country to start with. But we're relying on European companies like Ørsted to actually start developing that. But the intention, the goal is, given with these offshore wind developments, it creates a huge, very complex supply chain. And the opportunity is for us to create industries and jobs and companies within that supply chain that are based in New Jersey, the region, and the United States, and not to be dependent on, European companies in the long term. So New Jersey's just recently broke ground on a wind port in the southern part of the state, where there'll be job training, job development for all aspects of the development and maintenance of the offshore wind farms, and also getting all the components out to the ocean. So that's just one example of, trying to get the benefit of the learning and the technological advancements that other countries have made on offshore wind, but trying to find a way to develop it at home and the supply chains with local and regional jobs.
If I could add just a quick thing that we're excited about in Oregon. For folks who haven't been to Oregon, maybe a surprise, but about 80% of the population lives in the Willamette Valley. But we're the 10th largest state in terms of area. We recently passed, and I'm glad I was able to follow Richard, because business actually came to us and asked for a new fee schedule so they could put more investments, not just in the urban area, but with actually the majority of the dollars coming into this new fund specifically for the rural areas, to try to develop not just a more robust backbone, but also a series of micro energy generated activities throughout the state of Oregon, which we believe is important both for resiliency toward disasters, but also if it's smaller and more local and there's more buy-in, getting an excitement factor of trying to get into renewable energies in cultural areas that aren't necessarily traditionally excited about renewable energy. We believe that the Build Back Better agenda will actually help us optimize that faster. It'll accelerate it and it'll make it better. And I would be remiss if I didn't mention that as we are trying to shift and support moving into a new era of energy generation, we have to also change some minds and change some cultural understandings along the way. And I'm excited about the opportunities that the Build Back Better agenda actually provides in order to do that.
Great. A question came up, but going back to you, Richard, what are the challenges of small and medium and small businesses could with the infrastructure? What actions, excuse me. Okay, yeah, New Jersey have, what are the accelerating the transition to renewable energy, particularly small and businesses? What are some of the challenges? So it's a quick round for you as we round into the end here.
There are definitely a lot of challenges, but I just want to quickly point out there are a lot of incentives too, like energy efficiency. For instance, we have a lot of energy efficiency rebate programs, incentives that are aimed at small businesses to help them get over that initial hurdle in terms of cost to switch over to renewable energy. In terms of the hurdles, I was going to speak to this a little bit later, but a lot of it is the fact that these small and mid-sized companies are competing with larger businesses that have they're at a competitive disadvantage with businesses that are able to avoid taxes and are getting tax incentives that small and mid-sized businesses don't get. So a lot of it is, I think, some sort of a structural competitive disadvantages that small and medium-sized businesses face against their larger competitors. And a lot of these structural barriers are going to be addressed in the Build Back Better plan. So that's one thing I was going to speak about a little bit. I think this kind of helps redefine the basis of competition in ways that will benefit small and mid-sized businesses and those that care about paying living wages and being environmentally responsible.
Great, thank you. And Senator Caskey, I apologize if I messed your name up there. One of the questions we're looking at too is the White House had talked about the Civilian Conservation Corps, and in implementing that, ensuring that it's not just the traditional demographics who jump into these programs. How could that help your communities and the communities you work with? I'll throw that out to the broader team here. How is that Conservation Corps? I know Representative Evans, you talked about this in a little bit, but anyone else have anything to add? All right, it looks like we've come to the end of our question and answer period here. But again, I really appreciate everyone taking the time and the insightful comments you have from everything from the national security side to the economic benefits to the really on the ground, how it's going to help the just transition move forward. And the excitement this has, because it really is a turning point for America in many ways to transition from what was a useful tool at one point, and now we have much better tools to move our economic agenda and security and prosperity ahead. So thank you again. And if you have any further questions, please feel free to reach out individually. Our contact information is on the press release, and we'll be shooting the video out later today. If the speakers could just please hold for a second while the attendees filter out. Good. Christian, if you can just let me know when we're good.
We'll do standby. Okay, good to go.
Great. All right. Thank you, everyone. That was, I learned some things in that, so it was great.
Thanks.
I want to echo that. I mean, thank you all so much for attending and answering all these questions. They were truly enlightening. I had no idea what's going on in Illinois and of course, North Carolina. You're so articulate, and Oregon, you always bring aspects I never think about there, Paul.
Try.
And
Thank you.
as for Utah, I'm really astonished. I had no idea the coal was so dominant right next door to you. That's terrible. And yeah, so thank you all. And Richard, of course, the business aspect, it's really, it brings everything together in a certain way that I think the press and I am impressed at hearing about. And I don't know if Arizona Senator Peshlakai is still there, but I hope so, because her statement at the beginning was very well stated, and it's what we need to hear. I mean, people need to, as you all know, respect our Native American roots. Without them, we wouldn't be here. So thank you all so much.
Okay. And so now we're just going to do a quick 45 seconds. Does anyone have a strong time constraint that needs to go first? Paul?
Yeah, I need to get to the next thing if I could.
All right, do you want to give us 45 seconds?
Of why we need
the most, yeah, why Build Back Better is vital for your community and the nation.
All right.
And then if everyone else can turn your cameras off, so that way he's going to be highlighted and we'll get the higher resolution when the recording happens. So,
Paul, is there any way you can back up a little bit from the camera? Because that's perfect. Thank you.
all right, 3, 2, 1, go for it.
I'm State Representative Paul Evans, and the reason that I participated today is because the Build Back Better agenda is one of the most important pieces of legislation in my lifetime. In Oregon, we have done our best to try and put together a responsible plan for sustainable energy, but it really cannot happen. It can't come together without a national focus. We need both